After the incredible success of La La Land, it's nice to know the musical genre isn't quite dead yet. When I think of musicals, I always think of Gene Kelly and his films like Singing in the Rain and An American in Paris, which still look amazing today. They have this lasting quality to them. Of all the great musicals produced in the golden era of movies, On the Town stands out to me not only for the amazing talents in the film like Gene Kelly, Frank Sinatra and dancer Ann Miller, but for the incredible songs and musical numbers. On the Town, made in 1949, the film is based on the Broadway musical of the same name, which was produced in 1944. The film features music by Leonard Bernstein and Roger Edens, with lyrics by Betty Comden and Adolph Green. The Broadway musical is an adaptation of a ballet entitled Fancy Free, which was also produced in 1944. Most of Bernstein's music was dropped in favor of songs by Eden. This caused Leonard Bernstein to boycott the musical. The film is an MGM musical directed by Gene Kelly and Stanley Donen. It is also choreographed by Gene. The film stars Gene Kelly, Frank Sinatra, Betty Garrett, and Ann Miller, and also features Jules Munson and Vera Allen. The movie was a product of Arthur Freed's unit at MGM. On the Town was the first musical to be shot on location as well as shot at the studios. The film follows the misadventures of three sailors on a 24-hour shore leave in New York City. They look for fun and romance before their 24 hours are up. The first musical number, New York, New York, is just wonderful and is just so catchy. Many more memorable musical numbers feature With the Fun and Silly Prehistoric Man, Come Up to My Place, You're Awful, and the knockout number, On the Town. The musical numbers were staged on location in New York. It was the first time a major studio had accomplished this. The location shots in New York took 9 days to film. Shooting in New York City was Kelly and Donen's idea, which studio head Louis B. Mayer refused to allow, pointing out the studio's excellent New York sets in the back lot. Kelly and Donen held their ground, and finally Mayer relented and allowed a limited number of days shooting in New York. In an interview, Ann Miller took the credit for pleading and persuading Louis B. Mayer to do the shoot on location, as she had never seen New York.
MGM had an idea that you had to make movies in a studio, not only musicals, but musicals more than any. And On the Town being a movie about sailors 24 hours in New York, it seemed to Gene and to me that we had to be in New York. What it really took was Gene was such a big star that he was adamant that we film part of the picture in New York. They reluctantly, extremely reluctantly agreed.
From MGM's point of view, it was rebellious for us to want to do it on the streets, but it just seemed to Gene and me like this is a story about three sailors in 24 hours in New York. And New York is a city you can't do on a soundstage.
The only major problem with filming on location was the crowds of fans who flocked to see Frank Sinatra and Gene Kelly, who at that time were very popular.
We tried to think of places where we could control those crowds, because it wasn't just those artists, but this music was playing, blasting off the soundtrack. And if they heard Frank Sinatra's voice and they saw Kelly and Sinatra and they saw people moving and singing and dancing and cameras and lights, it collected thousands of people. It was hell, and the soundtrack was blasting and the people were watching. You can see it in the movie, actually. Behind the statue of Prometheus, you'll see thousands of people behind the wall.
To avoid crowds, the cast insisted on taxis instead of limousines for transportation, and that the camera be hidden inside a station wagon to reduce the public visibility of the shooting. The Breen office of the MPAA refused to allow the use of the word helluva in the song New York, New York, and so it was changed to Wonderful. Carol Haney, Gene Kelly's assistant, performed with Kelly in the Day in New York ballet sequence, but was not credited. This was Haney's screen debut. Vern Hoffman has an uncredited role as the shipyard worker who sings the opening song. In her screen debut, Alice Pierce repeated her 1944 Broadway stage role as Lucy Smealer, the roommate with the unfortunate sneezing problem. Ann Miller commented in a TCM interview that at least one take of her Big Tap number to Prehistoric Man was ruined because of her own costume. She had been dancing very close to the large dinosaur, and during a series of her trademark tap spins, the flared skirt she was wearing brushed up against some of the bones and brought the entire exhibit crashing to the ground. Filming was halted for a considerable time. Frank Sinatra, who was very thin, had to wear prosthetic padding to fill out the seat of his uniform. In a TCM interview, Ann Miller said that Sinatra was extremely sensitive about his padding and did not appreciate the usual movie set horseplay involving his lower half. The film was a major success and won an Academy Award for Best Music Scoring of a Musical Picture. It was nominated for a Golden Globe Award for Best Cinematography. Screenwriters Comden and Green won the Writers Guild of America Award for Best Written American Musical. In his later years, Gene Kelly held this film in very high regard. In one BBC interview, he said something to the effect of, "We made better pictures than that, but that was the apex of our talent. That was it." When Gene Kelly dismisses the beauty of a passing New York girl, Jules Munson asks, "Who you got waiting for you in New York? Ava Gardner?" Frank Sinatra was having an affair with Gardner at that time. Arthur Freed, the producer of the film, sent a memo to Gene Kelly and Stanley Donen during shooting, saying, "I just ran the cut, and they were the greatest and most inspiring works I have seen since I have been making moving pictures."
They saw the footage when we got back, and it was a revelation to them, and they knew that we were changing the whole look of the film musical.
We found a way with Stanley of shooting musical numbers of dance without cutting away and breaking the continuity.
Right,
and
exactly.
Really letting the dance speak for itself and be properly photographed so you
And
can really
be
see it.
cinematic at the
Yeah.
same time. You got a feeling of the energy moving forward in one piece.
This film was the third and final pairing of musical stars Gene Kelly and Frank Sinatra. Robert Williams, who plays the police sergeant in Car 44, also played the policeman who chases Gene Kelly off the street at the end of the title number in Singing in the Rain. Actor Jules Munson was terrified of heights. While performing on the tiny rooftop during the song New York, New York, the only way he could perform the number was while one end of the rope was secured around his waist under his sailor suit. The other end of the rope was secured off camera to Stanley Donen, and even so, alert viewers of the scene will notice that during the scene Munson is almost always touching a wall or a prop or another actor. For the first time in a movie, 4 trained ballet dancers subbed for 4 of the leads: Frank Sinatra, Jules Munson, Betty Garrett, and Ann Miller. When On the Town premiered at Radio City Music Hall, the line to get in was the largest in that theatre's history. After its initial success, Arthur Freed, the producer of the film, recalled his unit was in the MGM commissary passing the Joe Pasternak unit, which made less expensive musicals. One member of the Pasternak unit said, "There goes the royal family." Indeed, this movie was at the time the second largest grossing film in MGM history, next to Meet Me in St. Louis in 1944. The film earned almost $3 million in the US and almost $1.5 million overseas, resulting in a profit to the studio of $474,000. The film was also a critical success, receiving good reviews in various publications, including Variety and the New York Times. One of the promotional taglines for the film was "Twice as gay as Anchors Aweigh." Anchors Aweigh was a 1945 musical that also starred Gene Kelly and Frank Sinatra as sailors. Gene Kelly, Frank Sinatra, Jules Munson, and Betty Garrett were also in Take Me Out to the Ball Game. On the Town had such a great quality to it. It shows the vast talent the MGM studio had. The studio was at its height, producing mostly successful money-making films. Gene Kelly was truly an innovator of musicals in film at that time. He worked painstakingly to create films that were memorable. They have absolutely stood the test of time. My name's JonnyBaak. Thanks for watching.